Today let's read Curious George Discovers the Seasons by Joe Fallon, adapted by Cynthia Platt. George was a good little monkey and always very curious. Do you want to hear about the time George's curiosity helped him learn all about the seasons? It all started on a cold winter day. The leaves were gone and the grass was brown, but there wasn't a snowflake in sight. George had to bundle up in his winter coat, but when he got outside, he wasn't sure what to do. There was no fallen leaves to play in. There were no birds to watch. George had toys for warm days and toys for snowy days, but nothing for just plain cold days. George had an idea. He would visit with the bunnies, but when he went next door, the bunnies weren't in their hutch. He found his friend Bill and the bunnies inside. "I'm going to bring them to my grandmother's house for the winter, George," Bill told him. "It's just too cold here to keep the bunnies outside in their house." George was disappointed to see the bunnies go. Then Bill asked him to do a special job. "While I'm away, will you feed Jumpy Squirrel for me?" he asked. There aren't a lot of nuts and seeds around in the winter, so it's an important job. George was happy to help. George fed Jumpy, but that took only a minute. He wasn't sure what to do after that. He looked around in his yard and thought about summer. He missed his pool and blowing bubbles. Everything fun seemed to happen in the spring, summer, or fall. Winter was the most boring season. George decided he wasn't going to let winter ruin his fun. It might not actually be summer, but he could still do summertime things. George got the hose and filled his pool with water. But when he jumped in, the water was so cold. George got cold too. Brrr. He ran into the house. "Soak your feet in warm water to get rid of the chill," the man with the yellow hat said. The warm bath was a lot nicer than the cold pool. George felt much better. The next day it was even colder. George bundled into his coat and scarf when he went out to play. He wanted to enjoy being outside in the winter as much as he would in other seasons. He sat by his pool to relax. Then George blew some bubbles for Jumpy, but when Jumpy tried to pop a bubble, they discovered that it had frozen. George didn't know bubbles could freeze. That was a surprise. Then George noticed something even more surprising. The water in the pool had frozen. Yesterday's summer fun had turned into today's giant ice cube. George was starting to feel like an ice cube too. He went inside to warm up and drink some hot cocoa. George was puzzled. How could a monkey have any fun outside when everything kept freezing? Suddenly, George had an idea. He could use frozen things to make a game. He filled a balloon and several cartons from the recycling bin with water. Then he brought them outside so they could freeze in the cold air. George didn't notice when Jumpy accidentally spilled some seeds and nuts into the carton of water. The next morning was the coldest day yet. George had to wear a hat, scarf, and coat to stay warm. He didn't mind though. He went to check on the balloon and the cartons of water he had left out the night before. They were frozen solid. George couldn't wait to set them up for a game of icy winter bowling. When he took the ice from the cartons, though, he realized that some of Jumpy's nuts and seeds had frozen inside. Oh well, George decided to try to bowl anyway. But Jumpy kept trying to break his breakfast out of the ice. George had an idea. He broke the ice into pieces so Jumpy could find the nuts. The pieces slid on the ground and Jumpy chased after them. George and Jumpy knocked the ice blocks around until the sun went down. It wasn't ice bowling. but it was just as fun. Besides, George knew that he could try his new bowling invention again the next day. He filled the cartons and balloon with water once more and left them outside. In the morning, George bundled up. "You're not going to need that hat and scarf today, George," his friend said. George went outside. It felt more like spring or fall than winter. George checked on his cartons and balloon, hoping for another round of ice bowling. But the water hadn't turned to ice. It was too warm for it to freeze. The weather was very confusing. Wasn't it supposed to be cold in the winter and warmer in other seasons? George went back into the house. But later that day, something amazing happened. George thought he saw something outside his window. When he went to look, it was snowing. George thought that if it was cold enough to snow, it might be cold enough for water to freeze again, and cold enough to make a new ice bowling set. Maybe the cold could be fun after all. George realized that winter, spring, summer, and fall were all great in their own way, but the pool could wait until summer. Right now, he had winter toys to play with, a whole chilly season to enjoy. The end. If you like this story, you could find this book and many others at your local library.